Good evening, Active Claremont. How are we doing? Merry Christmas. We are about 8 days away here. We have a very special presentation lined up for you this evening. Again, thank you all for joining us. We are Brian. I know. I'm so sorry. Hey, we gotta have the initial gathering, get people together. Brian's always watching that clock. Very good. Thank you, Brian, for keeping me on time. I do appreciate it. As I said, we have a very special presentation for you this evening. We have, I'm going to move my screen here. We're still learning some of this. We have Corey Calaycay. Some of you may be familiar with the name. Is going to be presenting a little history about our organization that I know I'm going to be learning a tremendous amount about the actual history of Active Claremont. So I am going to go ahead and... Corey, are you there? Corey did step out. He did let me know to make sure that his audio video was running on his end. Wanted to check and make sure that everything was good to go on his end. So give me just 1 second here. It should change, hopefully. I would hope. Yes. No problem. Corey is double checking to make sure that the people in his house have a good connection to the stream. So hopefully everything is good. How are things with you guys? Might even ask about. Oh, there you go. Yeah, Brian is obviously, it's the Christmas party, so we are looking to get those 2021 dues collected, if you know that you are behind, I think I still am, actually, so it's probably an announcement for me, isn't it, Brian? I hear you. Are we coming through for everybody? Everybody see me, hear me? No problems? Everything looks good on my end. So unless I did something... We're good. Very good. Gotcha. Okay, so a little bit of a YouTube glitch. Sorry, folks, starting a little bit late because of technical issues. But, I mean, as I've said, I think I've said this at every stream so far, and usually it's my fault. So it's a duct tape production, people. We are doing the absolute best we can. We appreciate your understanding. So as I mentioned, Corey has prepared an awesome presentation for us. So without any further ado, Corey, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. And sorry for that. As Matt alluded to, my mother wanted to see this tonight, so she's downstairs, and I just wanted to make sure the video came up for her. And we're all good now, and so hopefully all of you at home can see this as well. We did this presentation 6 years ago for the 20th anniversary of Active Claremont. Of course, last year was our 25th anniversary, but we really didn't plan for anything to celebrate the 25th year. And I was talking to Brian about it, and he commented it'd be nice if we could, go ahead and do this presentation again. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. It's basically, as I said, the same one from the last time. I've updated some of the graphics to reflect 26 years and added a few pictures and added the last 6 years to the presentation. So we have all 26 years here. I'll begin with a little bit of background of how Active Claremont came to be. And then once we get past that, it's pretty much just going through each of the years of Active Claremont, who was in leadership, what our programs were. And to the extent that I was able to get some highlights out of the newsletter, I inserted those in here as well. So with that, can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation at this point?
They can, yes. Okay,
perfect. So just as a reminder, this is our mission statement. Some of you may not pay too much attention to it in the newsletter, but our mission is to advocate communication and understanding between Claremont citizens and their local government, to promote public awareness of and interest in local issues, and to encourage a spirit of volunteerism in the Claremont community. So we're going to begin by going back in time before Active Claremont, the years 1989 to 1990. During this time period, those of you who were around in the state might recall that our former Speaker of the Assembly, Willie Brown, implemented a process where they changed the way property tax was divvied up with cities, and they shifted a portion of property tax to schools through the Education Revenue Augmentation Fund. And as a result of that, many cities were running into some financial challenges. And so at that time, Claremont decided to pursue an assessment district to try to raise funding to backfill for the funding that was lost as a result of the property tax shift. There were a lot of other things going on at that time. We began the process of acquiring hillsides for open space. We acquired our train depot, which at the time with some folks was controversial. Today, a lot of folks value having the depot. It is a kind of a centerpiece of our village. It's highlighted in much of the advertising material. Of course, now it's the home of the Claremont Museum of Art. There was concern about openness in the community, how we were operating our processes. And one of the things back then with the assessment district, it was pre-Proposition 218. So as a result, back before Prop 218, it wasn't required that an assessment district go to a full vote of the people, or that there was even a process to assure that a majority of property owners supported the measure. The process very simply was that each property owner had one vote, and they could submit a protest. But if it didn't constitute in the end a majority plus one of the property owners protesting, it was automatically put into effect. And so it was very difficult prior to Prop 218 to challenge those assessments. Some of you might recall Les Boring. He was a resident here for many years. He began a petition process to oppose the assessment district. But the challenge there again was that some of the people who signed were not property owners. Others were maybe husband and wife, and only one was counted per the way you determined if a property is being registered for or against the assessment. And so in the end, 3,000 signatures were gathered, but they disqualified over half of them, and it didn't constitute a majority protest of property owners. So the assessment district went forward. So there was an election at the same time. And at that time, that was my first run for city council. I got involved in the petition process through Les, and there were 3 seats open, and they looked for 3 candidates to run. And at the time, they had gotten Al Liga. You can see him in the upper right-hand corner there of the Courier article. The upper left-hand corner is Jack Mansfield. He was another candidate that was run. And then you can see a young guy with hair down in the middle bottom there. Of course, myself. We were the 3 candidates who were run to oppose the assessment district. In the end, only Al Liga was elected. 2 incumbents were reelected at the time, Diane Ring and Nick Presikin. That was my entry into politics, but in turn, that was kind of what started this movement in Claremont of folks that were, concerned about some of the issues and the way we decided things in town.
Very cool.
Thereafter, there were 2 more elections in '92 and '94, and in the final analysis, I should mention first, these are some of the folks that got very engaged in electioneering during our campaigns to try to get a representative on the city council. And in the picture there, you'll see Ann Bissett, John Hart, Matt's grandfather, John Ozias, Tom Lamb, one of our past presidents, and in the lower picture, John Serpa's there. And the other gentleman on the far left is our first president, Dave Ramirez. And so these folks, every time we had an election, they'd get involved and get very engaged. But in the final analysis, we were never able to capture a seat other than the seat that Al Liga was able to win. So come 1994, after the 3rd election that we tried to run a candidate and we weren't successful, I realized that we had a lot of great people that had something to offer the community, and they'd only come out at election time, and then in between times they were gone. If we went to meetings and spoke out, the council would suggest that we weren't informed about issues, that we weren't involved. So a group of us from amongst the people in those pictures got together, and I encouraged that we should form an organization, and the mission of the organization should be to educate ourselves on local issues so that they can't accuse us of being uninformed. But then also that we should have an element of volunteerism in the group so that we're giving back to the community, so they can't criticize us in that regard, that we're actually doing a service for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so this in the right corner there, you'll see the agenda of our first meeting to organize the group. And of course, we met at Dave Ramirez's home. He lived in the Sumner neighborhood, and he agreed to be our first president. And so those were the beginnings of Active Claremont. So our first full year in operation, 1995, our board members were Dave Ramirez and Tom Lamb finished out the year. Doug Thompson was vice president. John was our volunteer coordinator. Bob Sarver, treasurer. Charlie Gale, secretary. Ann Bissett did our membership newsletter. And I did the speakers and programs for the year. Here's a list of some of our programs for the year. In April was our first program that we ever did. We met in the basement of the the old Home Savings, which is now Chase Bank there in the village. They had a meeting room that they allowed the community use in the basement. That was where we first started meeting.
Wow.
Doug Thompson was chairman of the Claremont Citizens Investment Committee. The city had made the misstep of investing in the Orange County pool that went bankrupt. Some of you may recall a few years back. And so they appointed a committee to kind of advise on better investment policies. And Doug was the chair of that committee. And so he came out to update us on that. I mentioned hillsides were an issue. And so Joe Cardoza was treasurer of the Padua Hills Corporation, which was the organization set to govern the management of our hillside land in the city. And so he came out to speak. In June, we had a presentation on redevelopment presented by Sharon Wood, who was then the director of community development for Claremont. In July, we had a presentation on Prop 13, and Chris Fosberg, the executive director of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, came out to address us. The city is a member of the Contract Cities Association. That's for cities that contract services. Of course, we contract library and fire for a couple that, in the city of Claremont. So we're a member of that organization, and we invited Sam Olivito, the executive director, to come out and talk about the Contract Cities Association. In October, we had a school board race, and so we had a candidates forum. At the time, the candidates were John Deerking, Joan Pressican, Nat Lord, Susan Edwards. And then in November, some of you may remember Dick Guthrie, who was the Claremont Human Services Director, and Beverly Speak. She was the executive director of the Claremont Community Foundation, and they came out to speak on their programming. Some of the highlights from 1995, in March, we initiated our library volunteer program. In April, we had our first speaker program, as I mentioned, and we were developing an Adopt a Highway program. In June, our membership increased to 45, and we became a member of the Claremont Chamber of Commerce. The Claremont Chamber President, Suzanne Christian, attended and spoke at our June meeting to welcome our organization. In July, we reported being active in the Southern California Water Company water rate protest under the direction, again, of Matt's grandfather, John Ozias. And we had our first booth in Memorial Park during 4th of July. And then in August, we held our first annual summer picnic at my home. And we honored our founding members, Ann Bissett, Les Boring, John and Jean Hart, and John Ozias. September, our newsletter reported the marriage of Charlie and Andrea Gale on September 9th. There were then 78 members. Wow. In October, we participated in Village Venture with our first information booth. In November, we mustered 22 volunteers for the Pilgrim Place Festival and contributed 70 to 80 hours. And we began selling business card advertising in our newsletter to raise some additional money for the organization. And we increased to 96 members by the end of the year. In December, we held our first holiday party at Bonita Terrace Apartments. We moved our meetings to Bonita Terrace Apartments. And myself and Doug and Dave Mattern were appointed at that time to the City of Claremont Library Task Force. And Tom Lamb was appointed to the Committee on Aging. And we ended the December with 116 members. So 96. Tom Lamb was our president for the entire year. Doug Thompson, first vice president of membership. John Hart was our second vice president, volunteer coordinator. Bob Sarver continued as treasurer. Charlie Gale as secretary. Sally Wishart did our newsletter, and I continued as program chair. In January, Doug Keeler, our superintendent at the time of the Claremont Unified School District, spoke. The next month, February, we had the water company did a water issues class for us. In March, we had our then police chief, Robert Moody. In April, Glenn Southard came out and addressed us and brought along the Claremont Police Canine Malag. In May, Bob Spencer, the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, spoke to us. In June, Chuck Kaufman, who was manager of the Claremont Public Library, came out. And of course, he wanted to also commend us for our volunteer service to the library. In July, we had a regional local issues forum, and we invited then Mayor Bob Nolan of Upland, Montclair Councilmember Carolyn Rath, and Glendora Councilmember Lois Shade to talk about some of the issues facing local cities. In September, we invited Doug Failing, the Deputy District Director of Caltrans. We were initiating a Adopt the Highway project, and so he came out in regards to that. Martin Weinberger, the former editor of the Claremont Courier, father of Peter Weinberger, spoke to us in October. And then in November, we had Claremont attorney C. Robert Ferguson on the topic of redevelopment and redevelopment agencies. Some of the highlights of the year, in January, we again kicked off our baseline Adopt a Highway. You can see the photos down below of our volunteers. We used to meet up at my place and keep the uniforms up here every month. In April, we began arrangements to begin videotaping our monthly meetings to be aired then on Comcast Cable TV. The project was delayed a month because the April speaker, City Manager Glenn Southard, did not want to be videotaped. That was controversial at the time. He didn't want to be on tape. The newsletter increases in size and content with the insertion of member opinion pieces in addition to the detailed summary of the previous month's meeting. In May, John Ozias became the first recipient of Active Claremont's Volunteer of the Year Award, and our membership reached 117. In June, we held a special issues meeting. That was our first issues meeting to identify issues on which to focus, and some of the things that were brought forward at that time: taxation, city property acquisition, city revenues and expenditures, increasing the visibility of Active Claremont, volunteerism, governmental reform, the Claremont Library, and economic development. Gene Hart designed and produced our first shirts and buttons for members to purchase and wear in the community. And actually, I'm wearing that historic shirt here tonight, if you can see in the camera here.
Very cool.
In July, the organization again had a 4th of July booth in Memorial Park. We also had a parade entry of our volunteers from the Adopt a Highway program in their highway uniforms. And Doug Thompson also arranged for us to have a hot air balloon at Sycamore School across from Memorial Park, and we were selling hot air balloon rides. They just raised people up and then brought them back down. Yeah. In August, with the assistance of member Tom Deno, we unveiled our first website. And there was the address. The organization had its second annual picnic at my home, and our membership reached 162. In September, the newsletter reported that our website netted 2 new members, Sam and Julie Pedrosa. And then in November, 16 members volunteered over 70 hours at the Pilgrim Place Festival. And then in December, Gene Hart initiated a telephone committee to remind members of the meetings each month. 85 members and guests attended our second annual holiday party at Bonita Terrace Apartments. And as a part of the event, we undertook an effort to collect food for holiday baskets. And we ended the year with a record 219 members. Wow. 1997, Doug Thompson took over as president. Vince Elward was our first vice president of membership. John Hart continued as the second vice president and volunteer coordinator. Bob Sarver, Charlie Gale continued as treasurer and secretary, respectively. Sally Wishart continued with the newsletter, and I continued with the programs. In January of 97, we had our first city council candidates forum, and Tom Lamb was running, Karen Rosenthal, Paul Held, Alan Croner, Joe O'Toole, Susan Smith, and Bill Weiss. In February, we had our county supervisor at the time, Mike Antonovich. In March, we had a presentation on residential care facilities featuring Keith Penman with the Pomona San Gabriel Valley Regional Center. In April, we had our LA County Battalion Chief, Fred Morton, address us. In May, Doug Keeler returned to talk about the school district. In June, we had a presentation on the Brown Act featuring Rich McKee and Anne Marie Sanchez, Michael Warder, and Martin Weinberger. And then in July, we had our second goals and objectives discussion. September, we had a presentation on Megan's Law featuring Jane Murphy Shapiro, president of KidSafe. In October, we had our second school board candidates forum with Jack Mills, Richard Bunk, Mona Sparks Johnson, and Sam Mowbray. The pictures at the bottom are Rich McKee, and then the school board candidates that I could find pictures for: Sam Mowbray, Richard Bunk, and Jack Mills. In March, as far as highlights, Active Claremont obtained our tax-exempt corporation status thanks to Andrea Gale and Jerry Allen. 2 of Active Claremont's youth volunteers were acknowledged in the newsletter: Justin Kadzow, who had attained the rank of Eagle Scout, and Jonathan Kibler, who was headed for a study abroad program at the University of Constance in Germany. Wow. And then in April, Mark Garofalo, the regional director of the LA County Library System, advises our volunteers that the library is the #1 in the region for the use of volunteers. And reference is made to a new volunteer program that is being explored in partnership with LA County that would create an active neighbor program. Funding and insurance for the program would be covered through LA County. In May, Ruth Pitt received our Active Claremont's Volunteer of the Year award. And in June, we began a new column, a Personality of the Month, that John Hart wrote. It was highlighting one of our most seasoned Active Claremont members, Lola Worley, who was age 92.
Wow.
There we go. Moving on to 1998. Bob Sarver moved up to president. Wilma Frazee was our first vice president. John Hart continued in the second vice president position. Andrea Gale moved to treasurer. Mary Noonan became our secretary. Jean Hart became our membership chair. Sally Wishart continued with the newsletter. I continued with programs. And we added a publicity position with Doug Thompson. In January, our program was Pay Now or Pay Later, a presentation regarding the Bay Delta, featuring Tim Worley of Three Valleys Municipal Water District. In February, we had Chuck Kaufman again to speak about the library manager. In March, we had a presentation on AB 939, which was requiring recycling. And Dennis Chiappetta, the chief operating officer of Athens Disposal, addressed us on that topic. In April, privatization of utility companies. There was a panel discussion featuring Michael Doyle of the Public Utilities Commission, Sigrid Hawks of the Utility Reform Network, and Richard Roach, the Public Affairs Manager for Pacific Bell. In May, we had our third goals and objectives discussion. In June, we had a presentation on the Alameda Corridor East project featuring Gary Corval. In July, Larry Horowitz, the president of the Claremont Police Officers Association, and Willie White, City Councilmember Pomona, spoke to the group. In September, Robert Garcia, who is a candidate for Director Division 3 of Three Valleys, presented to the group. And in October, we had Muriel O'Brien. We basically split that presentation. Robert came 1 month and Muriel came the next month. And then we also had a separate presentation, an update by Jay Gomez, who is the field deputy of Supervisor Mike Antonovich. And then in November, we had Dr. Diana Lockhart, who at the time was the trustee who preceded Sue Keith on the Citrus College Board of Trustees. There we go. And then we're moving on to 99. Tom Lamb returned as president. Lyle Gustavson came in as first vice president. John Hart couldn't give it up. Andrea Gale continued as treasurer. Bob Sarver as secretary. Jean Hart continued with membership. Sally and Wishart and Jim Stripling partnered on the newsletter. Doug and Nora partnered on publicity, and I couldn't give up the speakers and programs. In January, we had our next Council Candidates Forum with Sandy Baldonado, Bob Sarver, Richard Bunk, Karen Rosenthal, Albert King-Tanar, Bill Weiss, Steve Markley, and Al Liga. In February, we had a presentation on the importance of voting featuring Ed Casanova, who is a former school board candidate in West Covina. And his story was that he tied for running for West Covina School Board, and he won by a coin toss. So that was the significance of that presentation. We had a presentation on regionalization of water rates by Leroy Barker, who is the regional manager for Southern California Water Company. In March, we had a panel discussion on local government again. This time we had Pomona Mayor Eddie Cortez, Arcadia Councilmember Gail Marshall, Laverne Councilmember Patrick Gaddy, and Monrovia Councilmember Rob Hammond. In April, plans for 7th College, for the 7th College, which at the time was going to be Keck Graduate Institute. It's been here for a while now, but it was coming at the time. And the speakers for that presentation were Joe Platt, Mitch Dorger, Paul Falstich, and Mark Acuna. In May, we had a State of the School District featuring Joan Presikin, who was president of the school board at the time. In June, we had a panel discussion regarding the judicial branch of government. This was a very interesting one. We had Judge Bruce Mars, Judge Jack Hunt, and Judge Bob Dukes, who is a resident here in Claremont. In July, we had a State of the City featuring Sue Smith and Sandy Baldonado. In September, we had a presentation on the Padre Hills Theater with Judy Wright. In October, a candidates forum for the Claremont Unified School District contest, this time with Joan Presikin, Nat Lord, Richard Bunk, Jake Wachtel, Hale McGee, and we also had candidates for the Citrus College Board of Trustees as well. At the time, Sue Keith, that was her first run for Citrus College against, at the time, Raul Rodriguez.
Hmm.
And then in November, we had a presentation on methamphetamine labs featuring Walt Allen, who is still a city councilman in the city of Covina, and at the time worked for the Department of Justice for the state of California.
Wow.
Some of the highlights of the year: John Serpa was the Person of the Month in January. February, Pomona Councilman White arranged for 20 youth members with the Pomona Neighborhood Revitalization Program to assist us with our Adopt a Highway program, which we moved over to Interstate 10. What happened was they started the construction on Baseline to widen it, if you recall, before the freeway came in. So they moved us onto the 10 freeway. Wilma Frazee was Person of the Month. In March, we experienced our first ever rainout, and the Adopt a Highway was postponed 1 week. Tom Lamb was Person of the Month. John was Person of the Month of April. In May, a new volunteer project was announced in the newsletter, tutoring elementary school students at the Claremont Wellness Center. And a handful of our members took a field trip to the Bernard Field Station for a tour conducted by Karen Mosier, the manager of the field station. Our active Claremont member, Lenore Jacoby, was recognized as Volunteer of the Year by the LA County Public Library. And Doug Thompson was the Person of the Month, and Lyle and Valerie Gustavson were recognized as our Volunteers of the Year. And in June, we celebrated 5 years as an organization. In August, we had our annual potluck picnic. We went to Memorial Park for that. And Darlene Rhoda was our Person of the Month. In September, we announced that the average age of membership had dropped with the birth of Sam and Julie Pedrosa's second son, Nicholas Austin. And our first Active Claremont Pizza Night fundraiser returned as its own event. In October, our Village Venture booth returned with Nora Vignoli chairing the effort. In November, Lyle and Valerie Gustavson executed our second annual yard sale fundraiser. We used to do that, gather things from our members, and then we participate in the city yard sale.
Wow.
Active Claremont volunteers again supported the Pilgrim Place Festival, and then we closed out the year, sadly reporting the passing of our first president, David Ramirez, on November 14th. Over 45 members attended the 5th annual holiday party, which we moved to St. Ambrose Church. And it was reported that, I led this group singing Christmas carols at the event. Not a good thing. And Valerie Gustavson and Florence Cohn continued a program they started, Toys for Hopi Project. We collected bicycles and toys, and they gave them to Hopi tribe members. I believe they were in Arizona. So moving on to 2000, awesome. John Hart became the president. I was first vice president of speaker and programs. Lyle was second vice president of volunteers. And you can see the rest there. I'll kind of move it along here. I won't read them every time. Moving on to our programs for the year. In January, village expansion. And of course, you all may remember that roundabout that was very controversial. Craig Bradshaw and Brian DeSatnik spoke on that. In February, we had a presentation on Alzheimer's featuring Smita Sangvi, who owns that Mountain View Alzheimer's facility on Baseline. And we also had a debate on Proposition 26, which was reducing the threshold for school bond approval to a simple majority. And that was Doug Thompson and Garrett Shand that did that presentation. In March, Rich McKee returned to Active Claremont to talk about open government. In April, Gil Garcetti, our DA, appeared. In May, Measure Y, school bond debate featuring Jeff Stark, Jeannie Hamilton, and Lud Trosbeck. In June, our goals and objectives discussion. In July, Bila Pisto-Kirtley, who is a board member of the South Coast Air Quality Management District, addressed us. In September, we had Steve Cooley, who was running for DA at the time. And he was a deputy DA in the office. And then October, we had a presentation by Vulcan Materials. And in November, my speaker fell through on me. There was a glitch, and so I ended up just doing an impromptu presentation.
Nice.
In January, we moved our monthly meeting to the school board meeting room at the former Kirkendall Education Center on the corner of Mountain and Baseline for the first 2 months of the year due to renovations at the Claremont Public Library. I forgot to mention that the previous year we had started meeting in the library meeting room. And that was, that was something that we were allowed to do because of our volunteer program. They were welcoming us to have our meetings there monthly. In a related story, our newsletter reported on the need for a significant number of volunteers to help move the books and shelves in the library for the renovation. And our newsletter reported that back in November, our Adopt a Highway volunteer, Bob Alejandro, found 10 abandoned 6-week-old puppies. Member Alan Croner housed them, and members Edie Selke and Lenore Jacoby funded vet and medical expenses. They were being offered for adoption. Active Claremont volunteers undertook a new but temporary assignment, barcoding library books at Vista and Sycamore schools. In February, our newsletter reported that Valerie Gustavson was sworn in as a new U.S. citizen at the Fairplex. In March, our Pizza Night social fundraiser kicks off as a new tri-annual event for the organization. The newsletter reported the passing of our most senior member, Lola Worley, at age 95. In April, Valerie Gustavson undertook yet another fundraising project for the organization, recycling. And then in May, Margot McDonald was our volunteer of the year. The Vista and Sycamore Schools barcoding project was completed. And then in June, John Hart spearheaded and executed the first annual Just for Kids, a competition featuring running, jumping, and throwing events organized with the support of many community members and organizations, including the city, the school district, the Kiwanis Club, and our second triannual pizza night was held, and our new website was unveiled at that time. Just quickly on the Just for Kids event, that was a great event that John came up with to try to, get more young families involved in the organization. And I think he'd mentioned to me lately that he's in the process of trying to get something like that going again for next year. So stay tuned regarding that.
Awesome.
In August, we had our annual potluck picnic back at my home. In September, we had our third triannual pizza night. In October, Alan Croner and John Hart organized and executed the Village Venture booth, again, distributing literature and trick-or-treat bags. And our membership reached the highest point, 253. In November, Lyle and Valerie and Alan Croner put on the third annual yard sale. Active Claremont volunteers continued our support of the Pilgrim Place Festival. And in December, again, we did the Toys for Hopi project, and our holiday party made our final move to Claremont Place. So we've been at Claremont Place since 2000. Moving on to 2001, I moved up to president. I don't know who that guy is in the picture, but apparently he was the president. Stacy Matranga was our first vice president. Alan Croner was our second vice president. And then you can see there all of the rest of our officers for 2001. In January, we had the next city council candidates forum: Bo Bollinger, Richard Bunk, Paul Held, Llewellyn Miller, Apani Nasiali, Albert Quintanar, and Zephyr Tate Mann. In February, the John Fisher Project, featuring Kathy Curtis. That was the carved stone sculpture that is in the little pocket park there in the village across from Bardot. In March, we had a presentation on disabilities featuring Chris Garcia, the communications advocate and coordinator for the Service Center for Independent Living, and Albert Quintanar, vocation rehabilitation counselor. In April, a utilities forum featuring Janetta Harris, who represented Southern California Edison, Helen Romero Shaw with the gas company, Sigrid Hawks from the Utilities Reform Network, and Donna Silvestri from the Public Utilities Commission. In May, we had Larry Sheets and Doug McKenzie from the Claremont Committee on Aging. Again, our goals and objectives meeting in June, and then in July, our then police chief, Roy Brown, spoke to the group. In September, our school district forum with Sam Mowbray, David Speak, Chris Meyer, Steve Markley, and Jeannie Hamilton. In October, a presentation on disaster preparedness featuring Lee Sapadin from the LA County Disaster Relief Department, and Russ Brown, captain of our Claremont Police Department at the time. And then in November, presentation on Padua Park with Lud Trospect, Gary Mizumoto, Councilmember Llewellyn Miller, Betty Sheldon, and Penny Murdahl. And that was pertaining to them putting the sports lights in the park. That was a big debate back then. Some of the highlights of the year: Bob Alejandro recovered 2 driver's licenses while working on the 10 freeway, one belonging to the wife of the fire chief of La Habra and the other to Ojai resident Leslie Rice.
Wow. In
February, Pomona Councilman Willie Wright arranged for 20 youth members again to assist with our Adopt a Highway project on Interstate 10, and Wilma Frazee was our Personality of the Month. Our first triennial pizza month of the year was in March. Our second triennial pizza month in May with Bob Alejandro as our volunteer of the year. And in that same month, we lost Lenore Jacoby. And then in June, John Hart executed our second annual Just for Kids. Jim Stripling was highlighted on the occasion of his 80th birthday, and Bob Sarver our third president passed away. And then in July, our Observer Reporter program, initiated by Jackie McHenry and Susu Hockey, began. And to facilitate the program, a request was made of the city clerk to extend a privilege of free count. That was an issue back then, is we actually printed out all the packets. They weren't available online. So certain organizations were granted a free packet to include the League of Women Voters at the time. So they granted us that same privilege with Active Claremont. The request was denied by city manager Glenn Southard. So we weren't able to get a free packet. And then the newsletter reported the birth of Amanda May Gale. In August, we had our potluck picnic at my home. In September, our third triannual pizza night. October, our Village Venture booth. November, our fourth annual yard sale. And our volunteers continued to volunteer at Pilgrim Place. And then December, again, the Toys for Hopi project continued. And our seventh annual holiday party at Claremont Place. 2002, Tom Lamb returned again as president. Susu Hockey, first vice president. Lyle as second vice president. And there was the rest of our officers. I actually moved over to newsletter. In 2002 programs, January, an open discussion. We moved our goals and objectives up. In February, we did an informational presentation on the March primary propositions. In March, on volunteer opportunities with the school district, the Human Services Department, Pomona Valley Hospital Medical Center Auxiliary, Visiting Nurses Association, and the DA Center for the Arts. In April, Preservation of Johnson's Pasture, featuring Linda Wardlow, who is a board member of the Wildlands Conservancy. In May, a joint program with the Claremont Forum, a panel discussion on a more vital Claremont Village expansion with Mark Van Wadke, Ginger Elliott, Vic Moore, Eric Van Wadke, and Judy Wright. In June, Brenda Barham Hill, the Chief Executive Officer of the Claremont University Consortium, now, of course, the Claremont Colleges Incorporated. In July, a Gold Line presentation featuring Chester Britt of Ariano Associates. In September, we had a candidates forum with Brian Bocock, Bob Garcia, and Nick Presikin, who are all running for the Three Valleys Water District seat previously held by Muriel O'Brien. And then in October, panel discussion on California redevelopment featuring James Funk, Director of Redevelopment with the City of San Bernardino, and Bob Ferguson. And then in November, a presentation on how to develop a general plan. The highlights of the year: Active Claremont had a new domain name in January. Our program was suspended for the second time due to construction on Interstate 10. And then March, our first triennial pizza night, second one in May. John and Gina were volunteers of the year in May. We had our third and last Just for Kids, unfortunately, in June of 2002. In July, we had the announcement of the return of Dean and Jackie McHenry from Dean's 5-month sabbatical around the world to Hawaii, Australia, India, Tanzania, South Africa, and Italy.
Wow.
We had our potluck picnic in August at my home. In September, our third triennial pizza night. In October, our Village Venture booth and 5th annual yard sale. In November, we continued the Pilgrim Place Festival volunteering. And then in December, the Toys for Hopi project, our 8th annual holiday party at Claremont Place, and I think that's wrong. I think that should be 3rd or 4th. I think that's a typo. And then a new volunteer project begins to assist the Salvation Army in their traditional bell ringing and kettle fundraising program during the holiday season. I guess what that is, it's our 8th annual holiday party, but it was at Claremont Place. That's a correction there. Sorry.
Gotcha.
2003. Patrick Smith, some of you may remember him. He was our president. Mary Pat Apps, first vice president. Dean McHenry became second vice president. And there's the rest of our officer slate. In January, we had our City Council Candidates Forum with Sandy Baldonado, Jeffrey Carmen, Al Liga, Jackie McHenry, Karen Rosenthal, Zephyr Tate Mann, and Peter Yao. In February, Brian Bocock, who was elected to the Three Valleys Water District, gave a presentation. In March, Cindy Torres, the executive director of the Pomona Valley Habitat for Humanity. In April, Doug Keeler returned to present on the school district. May, I believe we did not have a meeting. That should have said no meeting. In June, We had a panel discussion, obstructionists or reformers. At the time, some of you may recall that Jackie had been elected to council and they were trying to accuse her of creating a hostile work environment. So we invited other council people from the region who were facing similar challenges from a majority of their councils, in some cases, women who are on councils alone with all men. And so the council members who spoke at the time were Debbie Acker from Ontario, Carolyn Raff from Montclair, and Gail Marshall from Arcadia. In July, we did our goals and objectives. In September, our school board candidates forum with Joan Prezikin, Jack Mills, and Bill Weiss. In October, a panel discussion on civil liberties with Martin Weinberger, Dan Golden, and Rich McKee. And then in November, after the fire honoring our community members, there had been the big fire here in the foothills of Claremont. We lost, actually, some of you may recall, some homes up in Claraboya. And so we had a recognition of some of our community heroes from that. In May, Dean McHenry reported that Caltrans is dragging its feet in approving our application to reinstate our Adopt a Highway program on Baseline. Reported the passing of Wilma Frazee, and Bill Wilson was our active Claremont Volunteer of the Year. In June, we returned to Baseline Road for our Adopt a Highway program. The Visiting Nurses Association contacted us for a volunteer house repair assistance program at a Claremont residence. So that was one of our first. And then active Claremont members toured the Miramar treatment plant on the invitation of Brian Bocock. In July, we announced the return of Dean and Jackie McHenry from another 5-month sabbatical. In August, we had our annual potluck at my home. In October, Lyle Gustavus passed at a very young age, very suddenly. We had our annual yard sale, still organized by his wife. She still saw that through for the 6th year. And in November, we continued volunteering with Pilgrim Place. In December, we lost Mike Noonan, and we continued with the Toys for Hopies and our 9th annual holiday party at Claremont Place. 2004, Brian Bocock, president. Jackie McHenry, first vice president of programs. John Hart was our second vice president, and the rest of the slate there. In January, Sue Keefe came to speak to us. She was president of Citrus College at that time. In February, Dave Demirjian, who was with the district attorney's office, the public integrity division, they basically prosecuted violations of elected officials in LA County. In March, Gilbert Pilger, and I don't remember what that was, but hey. In April, Mike Antonovich returned to speak to us. In May, Vulcan Materials Company. In June, an open discussion on goals and objectives. July, Herb Half was our speaker. In September, Hillside's open space panel discussion with Brenda Fastinos from the San Gabriel Mountains and Rivers Conservancy, Bill Wirtz, who's a Pomona College professor, and a representative from the Department of Fish and Game. And in October, an affordable housing presentation featuring Southern California Housing Development Corporation. In November, water conservation and water recycling featuring Rich Atwater, who is the general manager of the Inland Empire Utilities Agency. In 2004, our highlights, Betty Kramer and Dick Hall were volunteers of the year. We celebrated 10 years. Patrick Smith announced that he was moving to Texas. Our organization had its 10th annual potluck picnic and anniversary celebration at my home and unveiled our Civic Awareness Award. And Les Boring was the first recipient of that award. Assemblyman Dennis Mountjoy attended and presented a certificate on the occasion of the 10th anniversary from the State Assembly. And Active Claremont was selected to be a participating benefiting nonprofit in Herb Half's and the Daily Bulletin's annual concert Under the Stars. And we raised $1,000 from the event that year. In October, we had our Village Venture booth and our Scarecrow competition entry. Clara won the Scarecrow of the Year award. In November, we continued involvement in Pilgrim Place. In December, our 10th annual holiday party at Claremont Place. And we adopted 2 families that year through the Claremont Unified School District's Healthy Start Adopt a Family program. 2005, Brian Bocock continued as president, Jackie continued, John continued, and there's our slate for the year. Our programs, our candidates forum for city council, and I finally, that was my first race for city council. So Russ Brown, myself, Michael Keenan, Al Liga, Lou Miller, Sam Pedrosa, and Ellen Taylor. In February, the packing house planned, the plans for the packing house improvements. We had a presentation on that featuring Jerry Tessier and Mark Van Wadke. In March, Ellen Taylor and I came to speak to the group as the newly elected council members. In April, Janet Lablin, public affairs specialist with the South Coast Air Quality Management District. In May, the allure of toxic leaders, why we follow destructive bosses and corrupt politicians and how we can survive them, with Jean Lipman Blumen, Thornton F. Bradshaw, professor of public policy and professor of organizational behavior, Drucker School, Claremont Graduate University. In June, our goals and objectives discussion. In July, our interim city manager at the time, Jess Duff. In September, we had our school district candidates forum with Mary Canopiel, Chris Meyer, Kevin Arnold, Jeannie Hamilton, Stephen Lanusa, and Niles Hershey. In October, a presentation by the Claremont Wildlands Conservancy. And in November, our new city manager at that time, Jeff Parker. In May, Dean was our volunteer of the year. In August, we had our 11th annual potluck picnic at my home. The newsletter sadly reported the passing of former mayor and active Claremont member Nick Presikin. Tom Lamb initiated a city corner column in the newsletter. We used a portion of the funds from the Concert Under the Stars fundraiser to purchase several magazine subscriptions for the Claremont Library. And the Civic Awareness Award was presented to Apani Nasiali. In November, volunteers continued involvement in the Pilgrim Place Festival. In December, our annual holiday party, and our volunteers started something new, supporting the annual Salvation Army bell ringing and kettle fundraiser in front of the Claremont Post Office. 2006, Niles Hershey started the year and Tom Lamb finished as president. Sherry Morrison was our vice president. Joe Salas and Patty Mistretta were co-treasurers, and you can see the rest of our slate of officers there. In January, Captain Ken Pierini from the Pomona area Salvation Army came to speak, of course, in part to thank us for participating in their kettle program in December. In February, we had a water issues presentation featuring Marilee Scaff and Freeman Allen. In March, Charlene Betts from the Children's Fund. In April, Jeff Parker returned, along with Tony Ramos, who at the time was assistant city manager. Carlos Rodriguez came in May. He was the public affairs director for the Building Industry Association. In June, Marcy Lerner, Community Senior Services. We had our goals and objectives in July. September, Sister Terry Dodge from Crossroads. In October, Johnson's Pasture Measure S Forum. And then in November, our Neighborhood Watch, a presentation on Neighborhood Watch featuring Paul Cooper, who at the time was interim police chief, and Gary Jenkins, who was captain of the police department at the time. Two quick highlights: Joni Neal was Volunteer of the Year, and Nora Vignoli was our Civic Awareness Award recipient. 2007, Dean McHenry was president. Jackie was first vice president. Pete Vignoli and Kat Steins were co-second vice presidents, and the rest of the slate there. In January, we had our next candidates forum for City Council with Jackie McHenry, Apani Nasiali, Sam Pedrosa, Linda Elderkin, Michael Maglio, Peter Yao, and Michael Keenan. In February, David Cash, who is the next superintendent of the school district, came. In March, we had the meeting was canceled because it conflicted with the city council installation. April, we had our Claremont After School. We had a presentation by the Claremont After Schools program. In May, Kelly Middleton from the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District. In June, our goals and objectives discussion. In July, the question of whether Claremont should acquire our water system, featuring Freeman Allen, Marilee Scaff, and Alice Shiawasa from Golden State Water, Scott Carroll, our then Director of Community Services, and Dan Del Osa, who is a former employee of Southern California Water Company. In September, a school district candidates forum with Beth Bingham, Hillary LeConte, and Barbara Miller. In October, a presentation on redistricting featuring Doug Johnson, fellow of the Rose Institute. In November, a presentation on public employee pensions and proposals for reform, featuring Mario Minero, Chief of Staff to Orange County Supervisor, then Orange County Supervisor John Morlock. Our highlights: John and Marge Serpa were the Volunteers of the Year, and Mary Pat Apst was the Civic Awareness Award recipient. 2008, Jackie McHenry became president. Mapani Nasiali, first vice president. Pete Vignoli and Darlene Rhoda were second vice presidents, and the rest of our slate of officers. Whoops, almost went too fast there. Whoops, go back. So January, we had a presentation by Jess Romo, who is the airport manager of Ontario International Airport. February, Rebecca James Curry, who was then the editor of the Claremont Courier. March, an elementary school project in Kenya featuring Mark Loria, headmaster of Fiddle Country Day School. In April, a marijuana dispensary debate with our city attorney, Sonia Carvalho, at the time. May, a panel discussion on mansionization featuring Ginger Elliott, Susan Schenk, Belle Newman, and Paul Wheeler. In June, our goals and objectives. In July, Thompson Creek Spreading Grounds, acquire, restore, develop with Freeman Allen and Marilee Scaff. On September, Claremont Sanitation Services, cost, content, and contracting out, featuring Scott Carroll, our then Director of Community Services, and Carolyn Anderson, who worked for Waste Management Incorporated. In October, site selection for the new Claremont Police Station, featuring Frank Bedoya, who is then Chairman of the Police Commission. And in November, renovation and reuse of the historic Padgett Hills Theater with Jerry Tessier. In 2008, Kat Steins was our Volunteer of the Year, and Mary Noonan was our Civic Awareness Award recipient. Jackie McHenry continued as president in 2009, and there's our slate of officers for the year. In January, we had our candidates forum with Larry Schrader, Bridget Healy, and myself. In February, a presentation on sustainability with Michael Shea, who was chairman of our sustainability task force at the time. In March, Jeff Parker returned. In April, healthy eating for cancer prevention and the Beverly Lewis Family Cancer Care Center with Mark Dyer as a speaker. In May, Patrick Larkin, who was then executive director of the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. In June, our goals and objectives discussion. In July, Geraldine Perry, president of Citrus College. In September, our school board candidates forum with Mary Canopiel, Jeff Stark, Stephen Lanusa, and Jeff Hamill. And in October, we kind of broke tradition and got away from local government and brought in State Assemblyman Anthony Adams. In November, we had a presentation on a project exposing elementary school students at the Claremont Elementary School to scientific analysis and college life, featuring Hal Van Ryswick of Harvey Mudd College. The highlights of 2009: inflation hit and our membership dues rose to $7.50 per individual and $15 per family. Darlene Rhoda was our Volunteer of the Year, and Dean McHenry was our Civic Awareness Award recipient. He's our only member to receive both the Volunteer of the Year Award and Civic Awareness Award.
How cool.
In 2010, Mary Noonan became president. There's our slate of officers for the year. In January, we had a presentation on the crime-free multifamily housing program with Jim Keefe. February, Stephen Derer, manager of the Bernard Field Station. Jeff Parker returned for another update. Terry Nichols, who is the next superintendent of Claremont Unified, spoke. And then identity theft featuring Terry Yates from California Bank and Trust was the May program. Goals and objectives in June. We had a dialogue regarding the Claremont Unified School District with board members Mary Canopiel and Jeff Stark. In September, Paul Cooper, our police chief at the time, spoke. In October, the debate on Measure CL, Claremont School Bond. And then in November, redistricting featuring Doug Johnson, fellow of the Rose Institute. In 2010, our highlights were Patty was the Volunteer of the Year, Patty Mistretta, and there was no Civic Awareness Award recipient for that year. 2011, James Merrilees was our president, and there's our slate of officers for that year. In January, we had our candidates forum with Apani Nasiali, Joe Lyons, Sam Pedrosa, Robin Hallman, Joe Armendariz, and Rex Jaime. Our February meeting was canceled. In March, Antoinette Navarro, who is the director of Tri-Cities Mental Health, spoke. Jeff Parker returned in April. We again broke tradition and brought in our assembly member at the time, Tim Donnelly. In June, our goals and objectives. In July, another presentation on redistricting with Assemblyman Mike Morrell. He was actually speaking about the new Citizens Redistricting Commission. Peter Yao, of course, had been appointed from Claremont to sit on that commission, but he had been unable to attend at the last minute. So Mike Morrell came to speak on the topic.
Cool.
And then in September, Claremont Unified School District Board Candidates Forum with Hillary LeConte, Joe Farrell, and Sam Mowbray. In October, in lieu of a meeting, members were encouraged to attend a school board meeting. And then in November, our members were encouraged to attend a city council meeting in lieu of our regular meeting. Our volunteer of the year for 2011 was Ed Richardson, and Jackie McHenry was the Civic Awareness Award recipient. Mary Noonan continued as president in 2012, and there's our slate of officers for the year. Our programs, Peter Yao finally was able to come to talk about the Citizens Redistricting Commission. In February, Sue Keith returned with Geraldine Perry, the superintendent of Citrus College. Tony Ramos was our city manager at that time, and so he came to speak to us. April, a presentation on the environment with Chris Williams. Brian Bocock spoke in May. Goals and objectives in June. Peter Weinberger came to speak in July. We had a presentation on trains featuring Lupe Valdez, Director of Public Affairs for Union Pacific Railroad. October, Brandy Orton, the Services Director for Real Connections. And in November, a presentation on the Advanced License Plate Reader System with Lieutenant Mike Sissick. Edith Richardson was our Volunteer of the Year, and we lost less boring in 2012. Mary Noonan continued as president in 2013, and there is the slate of officers for 2013. Our meeting was canceled in January. We had a city council candidates forum in February. Larry Schrader, myself, and Michael Keenan, and that one was jointly held with the League of Women Voters. We did a joint event. March, we had our crime-free multi-housing program and Claremont After School program presentation with Jim Keefe. April, Apanya Nasiali, who was then mayor of Claremont, spoke, and the following month, Tony Ramos came out to speak again. Goals and objectives in June. To be nonpartisan, we had Chris Holden come, then our state assemblyman, in June of 2013. And in September, a presentation by Ojai Flow, which was the group that, while we were trying to acquire our water company, was trying to acquire Golden State in their community. In October, Claremont School Board Candidates Forum with Nancy Trester Osgood, David Niemer, Joe Salas, Paul Steffen, and Stephen Lanusa. And Sarah Estevez in November, Scripps College First Sustainable Entrepreneurship Coordinator. Our membership dues rose to $10 per individual, but family membership remained the same at $15. And Jim Keith was our Civic Awareness Award recipient in 2013. So Ed Richardson moved into the role of president in 2014. There is our slate of officers. You'll note Michael Keenan was our first vice president of programs that year. January, our local water supply and future hydrofracking water demands featuring Clyde Thomas Williams. February, climate change featuring Joshua Fisher, climate scientist. March, mental health, a conversation on stigma reduction. In April, we had a candidates forum, our first candidates forum ever for Los Angeles County Supervisor, and Hilda Solis declined, but we had Jay Gomez and April Saucedo Hood, who came out to participate. In May, a Gold Line update with Lisa Levy-Bush. In June, I did my presentation, this same presentation, but for 20 years of active Claremont. In July, Amy Crow, our library manager. In September, David Shearer from Claremont Heritage. In October, a Measure W forum featuring, which was the water acquisition measure for Claremont, with Freeman Allen and Mark Sturba. And in November, Joel Harper, who wrote a children's book all the way to the ocean, talking about not putting litter in the storm drains, trying to educate young people about that. He's a Claremont resident, by the way. His family owns the folk music store.
Really?
And this is just the highlight. Again, it was our 20th anniversary, and we were recognized at City Council with a certificate from the city. So this is all moving forward now. This is all updated now. This is the update I added for this presentation tonight. Ed Richardson continued as president. There was our slate of officers for 2015. January 2016, we had no program. February, Charles Rich from the David and Margaret Home. Captain Shelley Vanderveen in March. April, presentation of the Wilderness Park with Kathleen Treppa, Charles Gale, and Terry Grill. In May, Ken Fujioka, the executive director of the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District. In June, a presentation on stormwater management featuring our then city engineer, Loretta Mustafa, and Brian DeSatnik, who is the director of development for the city. Our goals and objectives discussion in July. In September, Carl Hilgert regarding the CHAP program, Claremont Homeless Advocacy. And then in October, a Measure PS forum regarding our police measure, featuring Michael Shea, Bob Tenner, and myself at the time as mayor. And then in November, the Cal Water update featuring Bob Bocock. Mary Pat Apps was our volunteer of the year for 2015. 2016, Cass Armstrong moved into president. I came back to do programs. Going back just really quickly, you'll notice we had some vacancies that year. We didn't have a secretary. We didn't have a membership chair. So we were starting to have some challenges filling some of our positions, just to make the point.
Right.
In January, Stephen Dunn presented a history on Cable Airport. Jan Creasy in February on CLASP. In March, Harry Brown Hegel on the Pomona Farmers Market. In April, Kirk Howie, the Cal Water Fix Echo Restore. Tony Ramos came for an update on the city. Nancy Minty, the director of Uncommon Good. Goals and objectives July. September, Ann Bremer on the Claremont Energy Challenge. October, forum on Measure G with Richard Fash and Jay Pocock. That was a school bond measure. And then Bob Cruz from the Southern California Gas Company spoke to us in November. 2017, again, our slate of officers. We still had vacancies for secretary and membership. In January, Sky Patrick, who is the library director for the LA County Library System, I was able to get her to come out to speak to us. In February, our city council candidates forum with Larry Schrader, myself, Zach Corser, Abraham Patella, and Anthony Grinchell. In March, Judy Nelson regarding the MS4 stormwater permit process. In April, Ken Smearl from Wildlife Watch. In May, Roger Bradley and Ian Gray from Claremont Community Services Department. In June, public transit options. We had Doran Barnes, the director of Footle Transit, George Sparks, director of Pomona Valley Transit Authority, and Lillian DeLosa Gutierrez from the Metropolitan Transit Authority. In July, goals and objectives. In September, Rainbow Young from the South Coast Air Quality Management District. In October, Colin Tudor and Lisa Levy-Bush updating us on the Gold Line. And in November, Shelley Vanderveen, who is then chief, and Adam Peary to talk about the police facility needs update. And sadly, in 2017, we lost John Ozias. In 2018, Chris Calaycay came in as president, and we finally were able to fill all of our positions, so we were making a comeback. January, we had Oscar De Leon from the Claremont Farmers Market. February, Tara Schultz, our city manager. March, Dana Hester and Sue Keith from Citrus College. April, a Measure SC forum. That was the second police bond measure, or not bond measure. Yes, it was general obligation bond measure. May, Steve Sabaker from Sustainable Claremont. June, goals and objectives. July, Matthew Litchfield from the new, he's now the new director of Three Valleys Municipal Water District, executive director. September, our candidates forum for city council with Michael Sarasso, Zach Corser, Jed Liano, Doug Lyon, Ed Reese, and Jennifer Stark. In October, Sonia Stump regarding the Claremont Village Marketing Group. And November, Jennifer Ward and Christian Cruz from the Clean Power Alliance of Southern California, the competing supplier of electricity procurement for our city. 2019, Brian Bocock was our volunteer of the year. And then 2019, again, our board, I think, stayed pretty much the same. January, Diana Mendez and Eric Cardenas from Pomona Valley Transit Authority. February, Jed Liano and Jennifer Stark came as new council members to talk to the group. In March, Matthew Litchfield, again from Three Valleys. In April, Tara Schultz, our city manager. In May, Amy Crow, the manager of the library. Goals and objectives in June. The Citizens Climate League in July. a Measure CR forum, which was the sales tax proposed increase with Bob Bocock and Doug Lyon. October, I must have accidentally forgot to fill that one in. My bad. And then in November, Natalie Chaidez, who was volunteer coordinator for Fairplex. Alice Williams was our volunteer of the year in 2019, and then sadly we lost Mary Pat Apst in 2019. And here we are, 2020, this year. Of course, our president Matt Jones, and there's our officers for the year. I guess is second vice president vacant? I probably should have put vacant there. That may have been again.
I believe yes.
Okay, so that should be vacant. And then the programs, just as a refresher for the year, Tara Schultz, our city manager, Lara Jowie, Audubon Society. Of course, COVID kicked in March, so the meeting was canceled. In April, we started these, thanks to Matt, we started the online presentations, and the first one was on social networking. In May, Randy Lopez, the executive director of the chamber, came out. In June, there was an issue survey done in lieu of the actual goals and objectives meeting. In July, David Bryant from the California Botanic Garden. In August, a presentation on the Pomona College Benton Museum. In September, the School District Candidates Forum with Bob Fast, Kathy Archer, and Chris Naticia. And October was the Citrus College Candidates Forum with Laura Bollinger, Joe Salas, and Eric Kaljumagi. And then November, of course, last month, we had Adam Puri here, our acting city manager for the city of Claremont. And that brings us to today. Some of the highlights, we adapted to COVID restrictions and commenced our virtual meetings on YouTube. And our organizational conducted its first online survey in lieu of the annual goals and objectives discussion. And of course, Mary Noonan passed, in June of this year. And I just realized another typo there. It should be 2020 highlights, not 2019 highlights. So I do make some mistakes here. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it was kind of a lengthy presentation, but hopefully it was worthwhile. As we end the year, it's always good to reflect on the past, and hopefully 2021 will bring great things for our community and certainly for Active Claremont. I don't know if there are any announcements tonight about the slate of officers that'll be coming for the coming year, but hopefully this kind of gives you a real overview of some of the great things we've had, some of the great speakers and programs we've had over the years. A reminder of some of the wonderful people who have been involved in this organization, to include, Matt's own grandfather and many others that we've lost or who have moved. But it's really a great history, something we can all be very proud of, and again, something to reflect on as we move on into 2021. So with that, Matt, I thank you for this opportunity, and I don't know if I've worn people down. If not, we can take any questions, or if anybody has anything they want to add to the presentation, if there's anything I left out, or if they can add in where there were things that one program I couldn't remember what it was. If somebody knows what that was, they're welcome to fill in the blank. So
yes.
Thank you again.
Well, thank you very much, Corey. I don't see any questions in the chat here. But many people are just thanking you for a great presentation. Great job compiling the information and explaining so much of the details too, filling in some of the what was going on at the time beyond just what the newsletter would have reported. Just a wealth of information. I'm always fascinated by that. I'm always grateful to have kind of the history from people that were there. Brian is asking if he can get a copy of the program.
Absolutely, yeah, I can email that.
Perfect.
Yeah, if anybody's interested, I can email this to them. I'll try to go back and clean up some of those mistakes before I send it out.
No problem, not at all. Absolutely. And then I don't think we have any announcements for the coming year at this time. I know that there've been some challenges, obviously, with 2020, and we've been adapting, as you said, as best we can. And we really do appreciate you compiling this information and presenting it to us as well. I know for me, it's very refreshing, basically, to for lack of a better word, especially given what we've been going through with 2020, to see just how active Claremont has been and challenges that active Claremont has faced before, and obviously working through it. Not a lot of organizations have the staying power that active Claremont already has. So I don't see any other questions or anything. Huge thank you again to you, Corey. We really do appreciate your time. Obviously, especially now, is valuable. Just as we've had to adapt. You are being called into service much more, I think, frequently these days, it seems. But again, thank you for carving out a chunk of time for us this evening. Is there anything else, any way, how should people get in touch with you, or things that we should be paying attention to or maybe helping you with?
Sure. Well, one thing we do want to mention, another little historic piece here. This active Claremont mug, some of you may remember, was our gift to people who spoke to active Claremont, and on the backside it has our mission statement. So I also meant to share that as another historic memory of our organization, because I know now we've moved on to the notebooks.
Right.
I think one of the messages in conclusion tonight is I don't think that at any time, recently the importance of active Claremont has been so important. With some of the things that we're facing in our society right now, questions about police services. The state is constantly getting involved in our local issues. A lot of the issues that we're facing all tie back to the state. Some people are unhappy about the changing of our elections to coincide with state and federal. The fact that we went to districts, the problems we have with the public employees retirement system, the pressure on higher density development. You name it. You got on stormwater, the cost of stormwater, and the what's all involved in that. All of these things are mandates that have been created by the state. And one of the things coming up at our January council meeting, I've asked for a discussion. There's a group of cities, elected officials within LA County that want to start pushing back for local control. And we're going to actually bring that discussion to our next council meeting. And I hope that, it's not just the city government that needs to push back. Our citizens need to start putting pressure on our elected officials. The state, a perfect example, again, homelessness is a challenge. And that's another thing that's a problem with the state, because you can't make people take services, even if they're not of a mindset to make a good decision for themselves. If they have mental illness, they can still say they don't want services, and you can't do anything about it.
Sure.
And the state has talked about setting up conservatorships, and they've done nothing about that. They said that during this time of COVID, they were going to focus on COVID-related legislation. They did nothing on that, but then instead they were trying to still take away our local development authority to force the building of higher density, affordable units in all of our communities, whether or not it fits in, whether or not parking is considered. And they're continuing in those efforts. So, our group, hopefully in the coming year, we can have some presentations on those topics, and we can, in that way, hopefully even try to attract some other folks to start getting educated in the community. That was the spirit of this organization, to really be educated on these issues and to really help, fight the good fight in an educated way. And as people who aren't just malcontent complainers, but people who are contributing to the community by being involved in volunteer programs. And so hopefully we can build upon that in the coming year. I'm hopeful that I can, start to call on some residents that I met going door to door in my election to see if we can get them involved in the group, build back a Just for Kids program, and try to take advantage of what this organization is supposed to be, to help us, move forward out of COVID and dealing with issues of crime and homelessness and, even development in our community in the coming years.
Very good. Awesome. Well, you heard it here, folks. Definitely reach out to Corey and of course, pay attention to the issues that are coming up. There are a ton of issues, and I know I feel like I've expressed this every time we've had a speaker, it's absolutely something that we're trying to stay in the spirit of our group by continuing these meetings. That's why we worked the way that we did to convert our in-person meetings to these virtual environments. Because of how important it is to keep this kind of information coming out to the community. And we can't do that without you, obviously, watching and sharing your opinions. I have, let's see, we have Chris saying that we have extra shirts that we can give away. And very quickly, Brian wants to remind people that we're not giving anything away unless you're paying your dues. So thank you very much. Again, a huge thank you to Corey for presenting this to us. I personally feel rejuvenated going into 2021. Again, having sort of a historical look at what we've been through in the past. You can't help but kind of have a fire lit under you. Seeing some of this stuff, very, very cool that we've been able to preserve that the way that we have. So, again, Corey, thank you very much. And everyone else, we'll see you next time, next month. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.